Okay, I'm live, and in this video I'm going to talk about how dreadlocks have the potential to change you. This doesn't, apply across the board, but it is something that you should take into account if you're interested in starting your dreadlock journey, or if you want to put a twist. You may have started it for various reasons, but as you went along with it, you started to understand certain things or receive certain things, energies and mental kind of qualities, or you perceived the potential of doing so. So I just want to tell you about my experience. So as I've mentioned, I started my dreads specifically for spiritual reasons, but this obviously does not apply to everyone. A lot of people started for different reasons, using whatever method they want. They decide, I'm going to get dreadlocks, I'm going to grow dreadlocks, whatever it is. Now, it can, as I've stated before, stay on the physical, external, material level, and there's nothing wrong with that. Some people look great with dreadlocks, and it doesn't matter if they neglect them or if they maintain them, on a weekly or monthly basis. It helps them feel good about themselves. It's an expression of their inner self, that whole thing. Or it could actually just stay on the level of the physical and external, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's still just hair. But seeing as I personally I am someone who believes that the human body is a kind of manifestation of a divine image, if you will, that the hair has special significance. For someone like me who makes a Nazarite's vow, this has very uh, deep meanings, and I won't get into the whole thing right now. If you're more interested in the Nazarite vow, I'll put a link down there to my other channel that deals with the Nazarite vow, but right now I want to focus more globally or universally on these dreadlocks. And I only know my experience. I can't speak for others and why they've done it. There are many other YouTubers out there, many other YouTubers out there who've gone through the same journey or a different journey, their own personal journey, and you can learn from them as well. So, what's the deal with me? I discovered that by letting my hair grow wild and not maintaining it, or minimally maintaining it, just to be acceptable in the eyes of those close to me, because I told them I would, not for any other reason. I found that as I've said, it teaches you a lot about yourself if you let it. But there's more than that. I discovered certain things, like that I loved the process. I loved the process. I was with for over a year. I was more often than not with a dread hat with a tam on my head, and I had no problem with that. I wanted it that way. I wanted it to sort of stay inside and out of people's view or vision. I wanted it to be my own thing. I didn't want people to be asking questions. I didn't want people to be wondering. I didn't want the attention. So I decided to just cover my hair and let it do its thing. When I was alone, in my house, whatever, I would let it down. And sometimes on the outside as well, on the street. But usually it was covered because I wanted it to be my own personal thing and not to have people ask what's going on with your hair. I think that's why I did that. Now, when I first started, um, I've had people obviously tell me, hey, in the beginning when it was uncovered, ask me what's going on. People at my job at the time, and I told them I'm growing, I'm letting my hair, do its natural thing, and I think it's going to turn into dreadlocks. And one or two of them said, no, 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 that's not the way to do that. You need to twist and rip. You need to do this. You need to manipulate it. But I knew, from my research, which was pretty mild or minimal at the time, because I was just starting out, and B, from simply how I perceived things to be, I knew that that's not going to be the case. I knew that I'm going to let my hair do its thing, and that's it. If it locks up, it locks up. If it doesn't, it doesn't, as you can see, and I've shown this in a previous video over here. Look at this. This is still regular hair, right? And these edges are kind of still regular hair. There's a lot here that's still normal and regular and not locked up and not all knotted up, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be all knotted up. It doesn't have to be uniform. It doesn't have to be anything but what it is. The best thing about natural neglect dreadlocks is they form on their own. This is something that's very difficult for some people to grasp. They are almost everyone that sees it, and certainly those who have approached me about it, and sometimes friends who I've been in touch with for a couple of years, and they didn't know that this is how it happened. And in our dialogue, or it came about that I simply let my hair go, and they said, "What? You didn't make a single knot there? You didn't start them? You didn't create them?" And I say, "No." And this is something that it's enlightening to very people. A lot of people don't know that if you just leave the hair alone and you don't mess with it, it will knot up. From the coarsest hair and the roughest of textures to the finest and the most gentle of textures, fine hair, it will also lock up. My hair was kind of fine and wavy. It wasn't prone to knots, not especially. But after many months of patience and after years of patience, it locked up, and parts of it are still locking up. And as I've mentioned, it's still growing. When I have a growth of hair that gets long enough, it starts to knot up and loop and bump and kink and shrink up and become a dreadlock. Now, as I said, I believe the hair and the human body to be a manifestation of a kind of divine image, just like it says in the book of Genesis, that we are a manifestation, a reflection of the divine image, whatever that may be. Take it, however you want. And I think that the part of the journey where it goes through the transformations, and to some extent the hair at large, because every, 6 or 7 years, something like that, the hair regenerates. And you're basically walking around much like the rest of you, almost, except for brain cells or maybe a few others. Your entire body regenerates over time. And every so and so years, you find yourself walking around with a brand new body, so to speak, because it's all new cells, or almost all. Some of them don't regenerate, and some, when they die, are unable to come back. But I don't know enough about that, about biology and all that. But I do know that that is the case with the human body. Sometimes parts of it can regenerate, sometimes not. And the hair is something that sort of goes through a cycle depending on the type of hair and the individual, I guess. And again, things like climate, things like diet, things like how you treat your hair, products, etc. It regenerates, it regrows, it renews itself. And this is something that has a lot of significance, especially if you're just going to let the hair do its thing. Because spiritually speaking, if you're taking it as, the physical mirroring the spiritual, you're supposed to sort of internalize. I internalized the fact that much like my hair regenerates when I just let it do its thing on its own. It's not that something happens and so you must renew. It happens on its own regardless of what you do. You may hasten it or slower, hinder the process, but it happens. It's a natural process to regenerate, to start over, to regroup and find a new find a new life, so to speak. A person who is on a spiritual journey, even if they know everything, even if they follow a certain religion with a certain path and certain rules, we're fallible and frail and human, and we make mistakes. And there was a very famous sage by the name of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov who said that sometimes you need to start over. As if you've never walked a spiritual path in your life, as if you've never approached the divine, the Most High, as if you've never started living. In the middle of the day, you suddenly get the urge to renew yourself. And so you approach life and yourself as if you don't know who you are, you don't know what life is, and you're rediscovering it for the first times. And he says that there are times when you'll have to do this process several times a day. If you feel that you've done something mentally, physically, spiritually to take you away, right, that makes you stray off the path that you would want to go, you need to restart and reboot your system, so to speak. There are different ways of doing that, but there are times when that will have to happen several times a day. And I can attest to the fact that I've done this sometimes several times a day. It's something I make an attempt to do every day because part of my belief system is that uh, when we sleep, there's a kind of separation that occurs. And when we wake up in the morning, we are renewed. It's as if we are reborn, right? A sleep is like a tiny death. And when you wake up, it's a tiny, comparatively speaking, it's a tiny, well, birth. So there's death and birth that's occurring on a daily basis. There's death and rebirth that occurs on a nightly basis. And part of what these dreadlocks facilitate, what these are pathways of energy. As I mentioned in the previous video, it's a link between the highest part of us and what is outside of us. And it links that which is outside of us into that which is a part of us, and it grows down into our being, right? Spiritually or metaphysically speaking. And this is something of great significance. It means that if you want these to act as spiritual antennae, they will be able to do that. You need to align yourself with a kind of way of life where that energy is being channeled in a positive way. Obviously, you can have dreadlocks and be a horrible person. You can have dreadlocks, you can start them natural, neglect, free form, and still be a horrible person by different standards. The fact that you have dreadlocks doesn't make you into a righteous or sage individual. But it does mean that if you let it, and I say this every video because it's not one and the same, having dreadlocks does not make you better. But growing your dreadlocks, especially with the mindset of being a better person, learning more about yourself and about the world and about the spirit, your spirit, and about the things which connect the physical and the spiritual, right? If you go in with that mindset, it can teach you a lot because, as I said before, it can teach you a lot about patience, perseverance, humility. It can help you filter out people and emotions and ways of conduct and being in the world. And through that, you can become a better person because you start to better understand what is actually important to you if you want. This means, right, certain people, certain practices, certain beliefs, certain ways of physical appearance. You can figure out what's important to you really when you let a part of yourself grow naturally. Now, sure, you could say to some extent, different parts of our body are growing naturally as it is, you know. Some things we take care of, like our nails, but, you know, some things like our nose or our ears that keep growing, and they don't facilitate any kind of real spiritual advancement or lack thereof. So, what's the difference? I think the difference is because hair, well, there are many meanings to the hair, and I mentioned one of them being like the crown. There are many meanings to the nose and the ear as well. Certainly, in the path that I'm following, the Hebrew path, every organ has a different significance. But it seems that for different faiths around the world and different religions, dreadlocks still hold a kind of, well, a special place. So it must not be in vain. I'm not making stuff up. Hell, even if I was making this up completely, this has been my experience with this hair. So that's the significance that I attribute to it. And there's nothing more that I can speak of. I can't speak of anyone else's experience. And there will be those with dreadlocks or without who disagree with me. Great. Disagree. I like disagreements. It means that there's dialogue. Well, usually. Um, so this was 15 minutes on dreadlocks and what they mean to me. As I've said, this channel is about the dreadlock and the spiritual path, And if you want, like I said, there's a whole other channel. I'll link it down there on the Nazarite vow, which is the origin of my dreadlocks. If you're interested, give it a listen. Like, comment, subscribe. Let's continue the conversation. Leave me something in the comments if you're so inclined. How do you feel about your dreadlocks? How do you feel about dreadlocks at large? Do you feel it's really just wishful thinking, or do they actually facilitate a kind of spiritual journey? Can they go hand in hand, or is it just me pulling things out of my ass? Let me know. Until then, let's have a good one. God bless.